Some stories are just sad. For instance, a family's house burns down on Christmas Eve, or a child is killed by a drunk driver. A marriage that seems so solid ends in divorce. Or a man who's worked hard all his life finds out he has cancer 3 weeks into his retirement. Some stories are just sad. But what's that got to do with you and me? Well, let's find out. 1 Chronicles chapter 10 is a sad story. It's a story that goes downhill quickly, getting darker and more discouraging with every sentence. The Philistines attack and the Israelites are forced to flee. The Philistines close in and King Saul's sons are killed. The Philistines close in on King Saul and he commits suicide. The Philistines move in to occupy the Israelite towns and they put King Saul's dismembered body up on display. And loyal Israelites recover the remains of King Saul and bury him and his sons, burying King Saul's dynasty forever. Some stories are just sad. But the last 2 verses of 1 Chronicles chapter 10 tell the reason for such a sad story. In these verses, we're told that Saul was unfaithful to God. Saul was disobedient by not following the commands God had given him, and he was dishonoring by turning to something other than God for guidance. And so God brought his reign to an end and handed over the opportunity to someone else, David. Now, it could be tempting to read 1 Chronicles chapter 10 and come to the conclusion that God is just vindictive and overly punitive. But in fact, it was Saul, not God, who determined the nature and the end of his story. God had told Saul and all the people what would lead to a good story and what would lead to a sad story. You can see that in 1 Samuel 12, 14 through 15. The choice was Saul's, and his choices with relationship to God determined the story. The same is true for you and me. The choices we make with relationship to seeking God, listening to God, and obeying God will determine the nature of our story and the outcome of our story. Some stories are just sad. Will yours be the same? Ponder on that this week, and we'll see you next week.